Broadcast. The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and welcome to the webinar, Ditching Spreadsheets, Track Your Energy Projects Using GRITS. This webinar was organized jointly by Second Nature and our partner, the Sustainable Endowments Institute. The webinar will be recorded and the recording will be posted on our website in the following weeks. Next slide. So the speakers for today's webinar, I'm Ruby Woodside. I'm the Innovative Services Manager at Second Nature. I'll be giving an introduction and facilitating a question and answer session at the end. I'm also joined today by Mark Orlowski, who's the founder and executive director of the Sustainable Endowments Institute, and Mike Pomeroy, who's the energy manager at McAllister College in Minnesota. We also have Aaron Karp on the line. Aaron is the GRITS director and senior research fellow at the Sustainable Endowments Institute, and Aaron will be helping to answer questions about GRITS at the end of the webinar. Next slide. So the agenda for the next hour or so, I'll give a very brief introduction on Second Nature's new partnership with SEI, the Sustainable Endowments Network. Then Mark will give an overview of the GRITS tool, discuss how campuses can use it, and give us a walkthrough of the platform. Just for folks who may not be familiar, GRITS stands for the Green Revolving Investment Tracking System, and I'm sure Mark will explain this in much more detail in a few minutes. Then we will hear from Mike at McAllister on how they have used GRITS on their campus. And finally, we'll leave plenty of time for questions and answers at the end. You can ask questions at any time during the webinar through the questions chat box, which should be on the right of your screen. So feel free to enter questions throughout the presentation, and we'll try to make sure that we get to them all at the end. Next slide, please. So just as some context for this webinar today, Second Nature and SEI recently finalized a new partnership. If you're part of the Climate Leadership Network, you probably received an announcement about it. So essentially, any school that is a signatory of one of the commitments can now have free access to the basic level of GRITS. So Mark will explain what that includes. I definitely encourage schools that are not using GRITS currently to take advantage of this, especially schools that have a green revolving fund or are considering starting. Next slide. So what are the goals for this partnership? Second Nature and SEI have worked together for a long time. Actually, we used to share an office suite. So we have been talking for a while about the best ways to support campuses who are managing green revolving funds. Revolving funds can be a really great way for schools to fund energy reduction projects. And we've heard a lot of interest in this from our signatory schools. So if they're partnering with SEI, we decided that offering schools access to GRITS could be a really great way to support campuses that currently have green revolving funds, to encourage new campuses to create green revolving funds, and in general to better help campuses track their energy, financial, and carbon savings. And of course, all this is really meant to help schools meet their emissions reductions targets and implement their commitments. So that's a very brief background and kind of high-level context for this webinar. Just a reminder for folks to enter any questions that you have throughout the webinar, and we'll try to get to them at the end. But with that, I'll turn it over to Mark to talk in more detail about GRITS.
Thank you, Ruby, and good afternoon to everyone. Very much appreciate Second Nature hosting this and organizing this webinar. I'm excited to be with you and to share with you more about our work and also the GRITS platform and what we've built and what's currently in use by quite a few universities and other institutions all across the country and even internationally. Before I jump into sort of the tour of GRITS, I just want to provide a little bit of background about what the tool is and sort of why we built it. The story begins quite a few years ago. In about 2010, 2011, we had just were wrapping up the Green Report Card program, which is our first main program, and we had sort of decided to focus on the intersection of energy efficiency and finance. And we realized that sort of two of the key areas were, one, figuring out better models for financing and funding energy efficiency and other sustainability projects, and the second piece was the data side. We asked a lot of schools how they were tracking their projects. Where was the payback being tracked? Where was the ROI, return on investment calculations, and other sort of financial and energy savings calculations being done? And the answers seemed to come back time and again with sort of spreadsheets, and even more spreadsheets. spreadsheets. And we thought there has to be a better way. And so we did a lot of work in trying to see if there was another system or a platform out there that might actually help you better track this type of project data. Obviously, at that time, there was quite a few, and now there's even more different web platforms out there for doing carbon footprinting, for doing real-time energy monitoring, for doing building dashboards, doing utility bill management. All sorts of different systems are out there. There's dozens, probably even hundreds of web platforms out there. But there's nothing really quite like GRITS out there that we're aware of, and that's because we've taken a very project-centric focus. And so in 2011 or 2012, we started to sketch out what GRITS might actually look like, and we began work on it in 2012 and beta testing in 2013, finally with a 1.0 launch of the GRITS tool on Earth Day in 2014, so about 4.5 years ago. The tool has now been sort of adopted quite widely across higher education and beginning to in other sectors. So there's now over 400 universities and colleges that have access to GRITS across the country already. And hopefully with this partnership with Second Nature and signatories, we'll be getting closer to 500, even over 500 universities and other institutions using the tool. Very basically, GRITS is designed to replace your spreadsheets and make it really easy to track all of your projects that you're either currently considering, the kind of things that are in the pipeline that you just sort of have ideas around but haven't fully finalized or firmed up, to track your projects that are currently in progress, and then also, of course, to track all of your completed projects throughout their entire lifespan. So that's sort of the basic idea behind GRITS, and we built it to be really simple to use, and so you could train someone up and show them basically how to use the tool in a half hour. There's even students at quite a few schools that use the tool. You don't need to be an energy engineer or an experienced sustainability manager with many years of experience. You can really have even freshmen and sophomores can jump in and use the tool. So we train folks up in how to use the tool typically in about a half hour, sometimes a little bit more, sometimes a little less, and you can enter your first project in about 5 minutes. So that's sort of the brief context. And what I want to do now is take you into the tool itself to show you sort of what GRITS is and how it works. So it works on an account-based system. It's a cloud-based web platform. We built it from the ground up, and the graphic design and user interface, as I mentioned, was designed to be really easy to use. The graphic design was actually done by a world-class graphic designer who used to be the design director of change.org, the petition website, if you're familiar with that, and then more recently actually helps lead Facebook's social good team on the design side. So he's a top-notch designer. We said, let's build something really simple that you could be comfortable with when you sort of first try it out, and we wouldn't need extensive training or to refer to a 500-page user manual to learn how to use the tool. It's designed to both run and manage a green revolving fund if you have one of these green revolving funds, but it's also designed to just track your projects regardless of capital source. And in fact, a majority of those 400 institutions that use GRITS right now don't have a revolving fund. And so, it's great for revolving funds, but again, the majority of users are using this to track their projects even without a revolving fund, and many have no plans to create a revolving fund. So that's sort of the brief background. What we're looking at here when we first log in is the dashboard section. This is a sample or simulated account with simulated data, so don't necessarily worry about the exact project names or dollar figures, just sort of made to show you sort of the capabilities and features of the tool. When you log in, you're looking at the dashboard. It shows you up at the top here how much you've invested and saved to date, the number of projects that have been completed, and the number of projects that are currently in progress, the median annual return on investment, the payback period, your unit costs per ton of abated carbon. While GRITS is mostly used to track energy efficiency projects, it also has a growing group of universities and others that are using it to track water conservation projects, waste reduction projects, and renewable energy projects. So here you can see water reduced to date in liters or gallons. You can customize your units, abated carbon emissions equivalent, energy reduced to date, and waste reduced to date. So that's some of the top sort of areas of this section, the dashboard. Down below, we also let you look at sort of activity for a given fiscal year. So you can see every single transaction across all of your projects in just one place here. So if you wanted to know what happened in the beginning of the fiscal years or a certain time period, you could see that. You could see every expenditure, every rebate received, any notes related to those transactions. So that's a nice feature to have. And then your own recently modified projects are down in this section over here in the bottom left. And then in the bottom right, you can see McAllister just made an update to one of their projects. Also the University of Michigan, State of Vermont, and Bentley have also recently updated or added projects to the shared to the to the shared library, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. So that's the dashboard section. That's what you first see when you access the tool. I'm next going to take you over into the projects section. This is where you find all of your own projects. So this is, we're talking about your potential projects that are considered proposed projects, in progress projects that are currently under construction or have been approved but not yet started, and then of course all your completed projects. Those are the 3 status levels, and you'll see those here in the bottom left corner. Now this interface here is designed to be, while it's pretty powerful, it's designed to be pretty simple to use. And so if any of you have ever used, let's say, kayak.com or expedia.com to book flights or make other travel reservations, these filters on the left, this sort of interface might look very familiar to you. And in many ways, we designed GRITS to be a little bit like the Kayak or Expedia of energy efficiency data. And what I mean by that is it allows you to sort of really easily access and sort of drill down into specific subsets of your project data that's most relevant to you at any moment in time. So if someone said, Mark, tell me about, what's going on with the proposed lighting projects that are happening, at our institution. If you had this data in spreadsheets, it might take you 5 or 10 minutes to try and figure out how to do some filters, maybe a pivot table or something else to try to get at some of that data if you have it in a spreadsheet. But with GRITS, all you have to do is go to the status section down here, choose proposed only, and then instantly, as you can see, this is updated to show 32 projects are in our pipeline. Now that's all of our potential projects. I mentioned lighting projects only. So we go to the project type section up here, click that list. It gives you a whole long list of everything. You can uncheck everything very easily, and then you can just choose lighting from the list. And now we're only looking at lighting projects that are in our pipeline. 30 projects meet that criteria. Maybe we want to go a little bit deeper. Maybe we want to look at lighting projects only in a certain building. We can do that very easily. Maybe if we have multiple campuses, we only want to look at it in one campus or another, you can do that. Or maybe you have a keyword that you want to use. Maybe you only want to look at LED projects within lighting. So in the search box here in the upper right corner, I'm just going to type in LED, and instantly it's going to reload and show you only that there's 12 projects that fit the LED search criteria that are also proposed. And under that, you'll see that you've got the medians across all these projects showing the cost and the ROI and the payback and the lifespan and the annual financial savings expected, et cetera, and also the totals if you did all of those projects. That all the projects are listed down below, and it shows you the list of them, and then you can sort by any number of these column headings. So if you wanted to see the best ROI, you could click on that. You wanted to see the largest emissions abated potential, you could click on that, and it resorts as you go. We could flip over into a Google Maps integration and see what that looks like. We also can create custom groupings of projects. We just added this with GRITS 3.0 that we released at the beginning of the semester. With GRITS 3.0, there's a new tags feature, which is an exciting development. And what this allows you to do is group any number of projects together. In this case, maybe these 3 projects all were done during the same time period, or maybe there's some other common factor that makes you want to group them all together. You can just click on tag, type in the name of a tag, and either apply an existing tag to it or add a new tag. And then later on, you can look at that group of projects and see how the performance of that project group of projects is doing, either in this section, or if you've upgraded to GRITS Unlimited, you can use the reports feature and do all sorts of nice charts and graphs with those custom tags, as well as many other things. A few other things to note on this section. This is where the project section is also where you can bulk upload data into the GRITS tool very easily using a spreadsheet template. You also can download all your data back into a spreadsheet from GRITS by choosing the download all projects option. So there's definitely some options there. You also can do a few other things like filter by completion date or cost or payback period, other things like that. Obviously, you also can look at only your in progress projects, only your completed projects. You can look at projects by certain tags by selecting tags from the specific tags from the list of tags. A lot of different options. Next, I'm going to bring you in and show you what an individual project in GRITS looks like, because this is obviously one of the most important pages. So moving over to the project details page. Every project in GRITS has one of these pages. And this is where you add data initially for a project. It's where you update and make edits or adjustments to data for existing projects. It's also where you view all the analysis and calculations and outputs related to a project. Everything happens on this single page for each project. And everything auto saves and auto updates as you work. So you don't have to worry about accidentally hitting the back button, or if you lose internet connectivity or something else happens, your browser crashes. Everything's saved as you go, so at most you might lose 30 seconds or a minute worth of work. So that's a nice feature. In this project detail section, you'll find the name of the project, the status of the project, proposed, in progress, and completed, the name of your project lead, a description for what the project is, and then also a very detailed list of project types and subtypes. So here we taking a look at the project types. You can see there's upwards of 15 or more project types here, which you can select from. And down below, if you choose, let's say, the HVAC project category, we then get to the subtype section. Click on that. And there's many, many different project subtypes. And a project in GRITS can have just a single project type categorization. So if it was only, let's say, a variable speed drives project, you could select that. If it had multiple components, you could factor in 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or more different project types all into a single project if you need to. Down below, you could select, if you have multiple campuses, you could select the campus or site that the project is taking place in. Otherwise, if you have a single campus, you can just go directly to the facility list and choose the building or buildings or facilities that the project is taking place in from a list of existing buildings, or by adding a new building very easily by clicking the new building link. Further down below, you have some data on the cost of the project, the expected or proposed cost of the project, the timeline for the project, and then also the resources tracked. Notably under this area, while the timeline for when it was approved, when the installation began, and when it was completed, that's all optional, but the lifespan is a required piece because that's needed for the financial calculation. So you've entered that in there. Then you have this resources track section. And as you can see, we have a very detailed list of resources that you can track. Obviously, electricity and other sort of heating related fuels. We also obviously have a lot of transportation related fuels, water, waste, even maintenance savings you can track. And you can track multiple resources simultaneously. So very much up to you how to decide that. You enter your cost per unit, you enter your annual savings. If you know your measurement verification methodology, you can select that here, but you don't need to do that. Once you've entered just those handful of data points, which again, you could do in 5 minutes or less, you will then get this page generating all of your financial metrics and calculations, including financial savings, but also energy savings, emissions abated. If there was a water conservation project or waste reduction project being done, you would also find those rows also being added to this table here. So you would see water savings or waste savings. Under the financial metrics section, this is great for the business case analysis purposes. You've got the simple payback period, the lifetime return on investment, the annual return on investment, the net present value with your own discount rate, which you can customize, your internal rate of return, IRR, or your unit cost per ton of abated carbon is also in this section. And then once a project moves from the sort of planned or proposed stage to actually getting underway, and there's real transactions and expenditures or rebates or incentives received, you can enter the financial transactions for a project into this project transactions log here. And you can identify whether it's an expenditure, whether it's a rebate, the date, any details about the vendor or the contractor or materials or invoices or anything else of the sort. Identify the amount of the transaction, and then GRITS keys off of the actual project transactions to calculate your financial metrics. Whereas initially, before this data is filled in, it's using the proposed cost as the cost basis rather than the actual costs incurred. A little bit further down in this section, we have the annual tracking data. This is where you can go and make adjustments. So if you expect your energy prices to rise in a future year, you can adjust that, or you get to that year, you can make adjustments here. Likewise, with the savings amount for each of the resources, they would have their own row, so you can adjust the expected kilowatt savings for a given year. We also have added utility price forecasting scenarios that you can customize and save. So what that means is if you expect your energy prices to rise by, let's say, 3% a year or 5% a year, you can save those utility price forecast scenarios and then apply them to projects so that it projects out accurately over the course of the next 10 or 15 years or longer what your energy prices will be in future years, and you don't have to do that manually. That's a nice feature. We also, on the carbon emissions side, as I showed you earlier, we're doing the carbon emissions savings calculations for you. We're using the eGrid data, which is federal government data provided by the Energy Information Administration, the EIA. That is down to the zip code level. So if you're just using regular grid-based electricity, you can just rely on those emissions factors. We keep those up to date, and they're time delineated based on the period of time that eGrid data is valid for. If you have your own emissions factors, we are happy to allow you to save and apply those own custom carbon emissions factors to projects for electricity and for other resource types, so that you can get accurate carbon savings calculations regardless of what your emissions factors are. A few other things to note on this section that are helpful. There is a notes section, which is very nice, where you can see status updates or other information about what's happening with the project. There's an attachment section where you can attach before and after photos. Maybe it's spreadsheets or contracts or PDFs, really anything you want. A few other things on this section also that I should make note of. There's an option to create a PDF business case, which is really nice. So if you click on generate PDF, it'll take about 20 or 30 seconds, and then it'll allow you to download a PDF. It'll also email it to you, which is a business case of the same project. So I'm going to flip over to to add Adobe Acrobat right now, and we're looking at the exact same project in a PDF form, right? Very nice, very easy and clean. And you've got all the data right there, which is great for sharing with someone offline, or saving for later accessing in a different format, or posting online for that matter. Alternatively, we also have added a public URL option, which we're pretty excited about and definitely have gotten some great feedback on. And so if you were proud of this project, or you just had a colleague you wanted to show this project to at another institution, you could just grab this public URL and email it to them, or send it to them any way you'd like, or you could post it online. And anyone that has this link can click on this link and they can see the project in a read-only format. And that looks like this. Very nice, very clean. And this is a live feed of the actual data. So if you were to make a change and then go back and reload this page, it would be instantly showing you the very latest data, as you can see, generated by GRITS on today's date. So actually, that's yesterday, I guess, but yeah, it was loaded it yesterday. The other thing to make note of in this section is there is sharing of project data into a shared library. You can opt in or opt out of the sharing. The way we've designed it is you've got 3 status levels, as I mentioned earlier: proposed, in progress, and completed. Anything that's proposed or in progress always stays private. So no one ever outside of your school would see data related to your proposed or in progress projects. Completed projects are shared in the library. You can opt out of that. If you'd like to opt out of that, though, you no longer can see the library. There isn't a middle ground, which is you can choose to be anonymous, but then the library is anonymous to you, so you don't see who's doing what. But that probably takes us to a good point now where I should bring you over to the library and show you sort of what that is. By the way, basically, virtually everything we've covered so far is included in the sort of free basic version of GRITS that you're getting access to through the partnership with Second Nature. We're now going to be moving into some areas where it's not necessarily included or only partially included. The library is one of the areas that's partially included in the free basic version that you get access to. And what I mean by that is this is a live view of the library. There's almost 2,600 projects that have been inputted by different institutions all around the country and even internationally. And the library is pretty powerful because you can do all sorts of different things. So for example, if you're only interested in, let's say, lighting upgrades, for example, you can see there's almost 1,100 lighting upgrades with an ROI of almost 16%. Maybe you're interested in LED lighting upgrades. So you can type in LED as a keyword search, and all of a sudden you have a higher ROI. Look at that, almost 19% and about 600 projects. Maybe you're doing an LED lighting upgrade project in an athletic facility. So you can go into facility types and you can uncheck everything, choose athletic facility or gymnasium, and you can see there's 43 LED lighting projects in here that are being done at gymnasiums. These are all completed projects. And you can see there's some projects from a bunch of different institutions all around the country. You can see what their ROI is. You can see all of this. So all of this is included in the free version. Where the line sort of gets drawn, where you won't get access as part of the free version, is if you want to click in and see all the details, so the equivalent to what I was showing you for your own project but for someone else's project, that's not included with the free version. And then when you can choose to upgrade to GRITS Unlimited, and as a Second Nature signatory, you get a 25% discount off of the regular cost. And so with that in mind, you can get access to this. And so if we clicked into one of these projects, you could see the whole project details for that project. So it would look just like this, basically, but for someone else's project, and it would be a read-only format. So that's sort of part of the library. The library also can do other things. Obviously, you can look at geography. So we looked at athletic facilities, but maybe you're only interested in, we're based in Massachusetts. So to give you a sense of Massachusetts, maybe you only want to look at LED lighting projects that were done in Massachusetts. So we can uncheck everything, start typing Massachusetts, selected from the list, and we're looking at 57 LED lighting projects being done at different institutions in Massachusetts. There's some Bentley projects, some BU projects, Williams projects, etc., Smith College. So all of that's there. And then the idea behind the library is you can use it to do some benchmarking comparison. You can use it to get project ideas. You also can use it for a number of other purposes, including finding out what contractor someone else used to do a similar project, right? Especially relevant if they're in your same geographic area. And you not only know the name of the school that did it, but you know the name of the person, the project lead. So you know exactly who to call at Bentley or who to call at BU or Williams or wherever, not just that Bentley or Williams or BU did these projects. So that's a little bit about the library. Obviously, you can do some other things. You can sort by facility type, you can sort by specific institution. So if you want to look at just one pure school and what they're doing, you can use that. And there's some schools that have contributed, only 1 or 2 projects to the library. There are other schools that have contributed dozens or more projects to the library. Some users are using the library very regularly and using the GRITS tool almost on a daily basis. Others are using it, a few times a month or a couple times a semester. There's really no sort of right or wrong way to use it. It's a very flexible tool and sort of can help meet you sort of where you're at. So that's the library feature. And then the last feature, this is the reports feature. So this does not come included with the free version that's provided. But the last section that is that exists is the reports feature, which is where you can look at all of your projects and see charts and graphs around the performance of the projects. And so you can look at energy savings, you look at waste, water, financial, carbon savings. What we're looking at right here is a stacked bar graph of the financial savings of different projects. And so you can look at specific projects. You can see the exact dollar amounts. If the projects aren't relevant to a specific chart, you can redraw it on the fly and look at the new redrawn chart with just the projects that are relevant. You can download any of these images as image files. You also can get the raw data out below as a spreadsheet or a CSV file and see the raw data here. And then you can build whole reports. So maybe you're interested in the financial savings and the carbon savings and the energy savings for a specific group of projects. You could select that from the group of tagged projects. Maybe you want to look at all the projects that have been done in a certain building on campus. You can select your building from the list and only look at energy or financial or carbon data for the projects being done in that building. Maybe you want to look at all the projects that are of a certain project type. Maybe you want to look at certain HVAC projects. You could do that. It's very flexible, and again, you can build a whole report with a lot of these different charts all together, and then you could print that out as a PDF or just have it available for offline use. The very last thing I'm going to show you before I turn it over to Mike and for him to share his story, what they're doing at McAllister, which I think is really neat. I do want to briefly point out one last thing, which is everyone loves a sort of a fun public dashboard, and so we decided to add a dashboard feature to GRITS, which is very nice, and that it lets you display some impacts about the project you've done to date. And this is sort of a sample dashboard. We'll actually show you Mike's dashboard at McAllister in a little bit and what theirs looks like, but shows you the number of projects you've done, the total amount invested, the total savings, how much carbon you've abated, maybe how much water you've saved, what the waste savings is. All of that's available, and it's very easy to just embed into anywhere on your own website. You just grab that little bit of code, embed it anywhere on your own website, and you can show that as a live feed your GRITS data. And you also can customize what format it takes in terms of portrait versus landscape. And then up here, you can actually decide what data points you want to include, up to a total of 8 data points. So maybe you don't want to show how much you've total invested capital has been. Maybe you just want to focus on energy savings and water savings and emissions abated. You can do that. A lot of flexibility. So the dashboard's another nice feature that's part of GRITS. So I think with that, there's definitely going to be a good amount of time for questions at the end. For those who have joined late, you can ask questions via the chat box that should be in the GoToWebinar interface over on the right side of your screen. And we'll be answering those questions at the end after Mike speaks. But with that, I'd love to turn it over to Mike Pomeroy, who's the energy manager at McAllister College, to share with you a little bit more about his work at McAllister and how they've been using GRITS. So Mike, hopefully you're off mute, and I'm going to bring it over to your screen, and you can take it away.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, you sound great. Go ahead.
Okay, so just a little context about McAllister. We're a private liberal arts college, small college located in St. Paul, Minnesota. We're about 1.5 million gross square feet of buildings, have probably 30 or 40 major buildings, approximately 2,200 students, 600 or 700 employees. We have a central boiler plant, chill water plant, and that provides heating and cooling to all our major buildings on campus. And then we spend about $2 million per year on electricity, fuel, and water and sewer costs. So about a little context about me, the energy manager position at McAllister was created in 2015, and I'm the first person to hold that role. And when I came here in 2015, I quickly realized the need for a tool like GRITS, because there was no single up-to-date record of projects that had been completed in the past. And after digging through all the various files that I could find, what I came up with was things like handwritten lists that had been compiled by our electricians, describing the fixtures they'd put in over the years, O&M manuals from projects. One of the best things I found were the rebate summaries that came from our electrical utility, and then there were various internally created lists and summaries that have been created by different people here over the years, but none of those had all of the information that I needed to do my job, that had enough detail or just enough characteristics pulled all together. So as luck would have it, in 2015, ASHE had their national conference in Minneapolis, and I attended a presentation on GRITS and was immediately saw the value, and we undertook a trial membership at that time, and we've been using it now for 3 years, and it's been great, really great for us. I've got a couple examples that I thought would be good examples of how we use it. They're all related to the same building. It's a chapel on our campus. It's probably a 50-year-old building. It's not very large, but it does. We have done a variety of projects over the years. So this first one was just a very straightforward project, a very simple LED lighting retrofit. We replaced all the floodlights in the area where religious services are held. I think there's probably 100 or more of them. Yeah, 106 it shows there. It's just, as Mark said, it's a very easy process to enter the data. It was a quick description, and again, LED lighting retrofits are very straightforward. I don't know if you can scroll down, Mark, at all, but there's in the notes section under the cost, you can see a very simple savings estimate that's written there, right there. It's just doing your math like in second grade of grade school. It's the number of lamps times the hours per week, and the wattage reduction. It's all right there. One of the things I really like about GRITS is it does provide this place to record the calculations. So my calculations may be off, but at least I know what they were, and I can come back to them at any point in the future, or any other interest party can say, well, how did you get that number? And in many of the projects that I've seen, that detail is lacking or it gets lost. And so it's great to have this resource to just include a note that's simple, and this is one of the most simple. It's just an efficiency improvement, but it was that feature is something that I really like about GRITS. So moving on, another project we did was this. We replaced we installed VFDs, variable frequency drives, for the air handling unit that serves the chapel religious area. Service area, and that was this project was kind of a piggyback upon another project. That air handler was probably in the worst shape of any air handler that we had on our campus at the time. It had I don't know the full history, but for whatever reason the heating coil froze, had been disconnected, the dampers were disconnected because the heating coil froze. It was just really in bad shape, and it had old pneumatic. It had some basic temperature control and start-stop control from our automation system, but pneumatic actuators and really out of date. So last summer we rebuilt that. We had that unit rebuilt completely from top to bottom. It was buried in the back of a mechanical room, so we couldn't replace it entirely, so we rebuilt it. And so we put in a new heating coil and new motors, and we installed those drives with the knowledge that we were going to be doing a subsequent controls retrofit. So in this case, I separated the drive project from the controls project because the rebates for those projects were handled separately, and it just made sense to separate them. So that's something that that is also a nice feature of GRITS. You can slice and dice your projects if it makes sense to do so. I found that in this case, it just was a little bit easier to separate the transaction that way. And so there's even though it was related to the same air handler, we put the drives in one project and then the controls in another project. So you can go ahead to that next screen, Mark. So this is the controls project. As I said, we replaced all of the we've replaced the mechanical components and then put the drives in, and then we did a brain transplant on that thing. We put in a new DDC controller, new sensors, and new electric damper and valve actuators. And because we had the better controls, we were able to also put a CO2 sensor in the space. Because it's a large single zone, it's ideal for application of demand controlled ventilation. And now what we do, we're using those controls to we modulate the drives based on space temperature, set point error. So if the space is comfortable, we can slow down the air handling unit And if the CO2 level is comfortable, or within the guidelines, I should say, that we use, then we can slow down the we can reduce the amount of outdoor air coming in through the outdoor air dampers. So that was a real nice project that was, again, kind of a piggyback upon a deferred maintenance project. So it's nice when we can do that. So the last project that we did there is this transformer project. And this was almost, I think it was the very first project that I did in McAllister. I was walking through the campus electrical rooms with one of our electricians, and he pointed out to me that we had 3 large transformers sitting in the electric vault for that in that building that formerly served the chapel chiller. The chiller, I should say, the chapel had its own chiller before we upgraded our central chiller plant. It had its own system, and it's a long story why they had to have those transformers, but they did. And when the chiller was removed, the transformers were left connected to our main electric feed, and they're very large. So we worked with an engineer. I didn't have a meter. Those are before the meter. I have a sub-meter in that building, but they're before the meter, so I did not have a way to measure the load. So we had an engineering firm calculate the core losses and found out they were pretty significant. And so we then had a high voltage electrical contractor come and disconnect those. And but they'd been sitting there idle for 9 years with those core losses, and just kind of a, I guess you could call it a vampire load or a zombie load, something like that. Mark, if you could scroll to attachments. One of the things, Mark pointed this out before, but I really like this feature as well for these more unique projects or complicated projects. As Mark said, you can upload photos. There's a photo of the 3 transformers. You can see each one of those was about 5 feet or more tall, and maybe 30 inches in diameter, so very large transformers. And then the other attachment that I uploaded there was actually the report from the engineer that did the savings calculations for us. So this is another feature of GRITS that I really like, because it's sort of a virtual file cabinet for me. And again, these are the sorts of things that would normally be stored in separate locations. Maybe you have a shared drive, or it'd be on your own PC, or it'd be in a folder on your desk. And it's just really nice in terms of continuity and continuity, really, to be able to have those things all in one location, and it makes it really nice for sharing with others. So then I guess just to show how that Mark already showed it, but if you want to go to the projects page, this is an example of how all the projects for the chapel are rolled up onto one screen. So again, if anybody, that's Weyerhaeuser Chapel, it's way on the bottom there. Yep. And anyhow, there you go, Weyerhaeuser Chapel. Yep. And so there's the 4 projects there, and you can, it shows the combined payback for all of them, and it's just been a great tool. And it's become more interesting as time goes by, as we've gotten more and more projects in the system, just to see how to do the comparison over time, how they've how they compare different projects. So that's really it with respect to the chapel. The other thing that I was going to share is our use of the embedded dashboard. Our department, and I assume many other facility services departments, are not really that great at sharing their successes and telling the story, I guess you would say, of what they're doing. And so this is when I learned that this tool was available, I was very enthused about it. And there's many more things we can do to tell our story, but it is great to have this dashboard available to just put out there. It's automatically updated. And again, if we didn't have this tool, I would be in spreadsheet agony trying to keep up with with just keeping track of the projects, and to have the built-in analytical tools that are there, all the ways that as I said, you could slice and dice the projects and see by type of project or in which buildings. It's been great for us. So really, that's really all I had, Mark. If unless you'd like me to share more.
No, Mike, that's terrific. Thank you for sharing. So I think what we can do now, Ruby, if it sounds like a plan, and we're doing well on time, is we could move into the questions and sort of discussion portion of the webinar. So I don't know if you want to hop back in for that and help lead that.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you so much, Mike and Mark. Actually, that was a really interesting overview of GRITS for me. I'm not as familiar with all the technical features of the tool, so it does a lot more than I realized, actually. So cool. So for folks that are on the line, definitely enter any questions that you have. I'll start with one that we just got. So this is a quick question from Mark. You mentioned the total number of GRITS users. We have a question about how many colleges are using GRITS right now. Do you know that number? You might have mentioned it actually, but
yeah. I don't have an exact number. I think it's roughly between the 325 and 350 range right now. We've got over 400 institutions that are users, and so the vast majority are colleges and universities. But we do have a small but growing group of K-12 users. There's also some municipal, county, and state users. The state of Vermont is actually quite active user in the municipal space. We have some hospitals and healthcare systems using the tool. And then we also have, actually international, we have some other institutions, some airports in Australia are using it already, and also some universities in Australia, and also some utilities and other institutions in New Zealand. So it definitely has a wide range of use in different geographic areas, but yeah, universities make up approximately 75 to 80% of the user base.
Okay, great, thank you. And we have another question about the tool's ability. So it says, can this tool just track utility usage by campus?
That's a good question. The GRITS is really designed to be a project-centric tool rather than an overall carbon emissions inventory tool or an overall utility or energy tracking platform. If you wanted to sort of have a system that was looking at sort of every kilowatt hour of energy expended for an entire campus and where that's going, GRITS wouldn't be the right fit. If you're interested in looking at sort of opportunities and looking at the project-centric focus of how can you reduce the overall amount of energy consumed at an institution, and what are the specific energy conservation measures and other projects and initiatives you can undertake, and how will that impact your overall energy consumption, GRITS is a great tool. But yeah, we had to draw the line in terms of the capabilities of what it could do, because if you tried to make it too much of a Swiss Army knife, it would take a half day to train people up on how to use it, and it wouldn't necessarily be nearly as easy and straightforward to use if we built on all the capabilities that we would ideally love to see something like this have.
That makes sense. So I guess kind of related to different ways that folks can use the tool. Mark, you did talk a lot about different ways that GRITS can track projects that are currently being implemented, and you mentioned briefly that you can have a project pipeline. There's this library features. Could you talk a little bit more about GRITS could be used as a decision-making tool and how campuses might use it for planning?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, GRITS is has definitely a valuable sort of role to play in helping, prioritize projects and select projects for investment or for funding through any number of, capital expenditure or other sort of budgetary sources or revolving funds or external funding. GRITS has the whole proposed project functionality because we want to help you get a project in the really early stages. So you can input just a little bit of data and have very quickly some rough estimates for what you're looking at in terms of the performance or potential performance the project might have. And then that can help you go to your CFO or other decision makers and then continue that conversation and hopefully get a green light to either fund the project or to do additional work to develop the project so that it can come to a point where it can be funded. Obviously, oftentimes there's a pipeline of potential projects a university or another institution has, and there's not enough funding to tackle all the projects or not enough bandwidth staff-wise to project manage all the different projects at the same time. And so GRITS can be really valuable in sort of slicing and dicing the different data you have on your pipeline of projects to help prioritize projects based on any number of criteria, whether it be payback or other financial metrics, whether it be based on specific buildings or geographic areas around a campus or across campuses. It has a lot of flexibility to help you sort of do that type of planning so that you're not just, swimming around in spreadsheets and trying to write formulas that sort of can get at maybe what what you want to look at, but instead you just have it sort of all at your fingertips, and then can share that also with peers, right, and with colleagues in your same department or across departments. So that's sort of also a key part of GRITS is, we want to help there be more data sharing wherever possible between teams and departments when it makes sense.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, that sounds great. And I just wanted to mention that I really was excited about the different ways that folks can share projects, and the public link that's kind of very clean and but is constantly updated. So that was very exciting. Let's see, this is actually a really interesting question. So we've talked mostly about tracking projects that do have either direct financial savings or mission savings. We have a question here about whether or not GRITS would be useful for tracking projects that might not have these direct savings. For example, student research projects that are funded out of student green fees. Do you see any ways that GRITS could be used to track those?
Yeah, so I mean, we've designed GRITS to try to be really flexible in terms of how and what types of projects you're wanting to track. So we even have stuff related to procurement and food sourcing and other things like that, waste diversion, whether it be composting or recycling, other things like that. So it goes well beyond just sort of your typical energy efficiency lighting or HVAC or other type of projects. So there's definitely a lot of flexibility in how to manage those and track those projects. Student projects, there are a lot of very small projects in GRITS, right? There are projects that are as little as $500 or $1,000 in size. Earlier I showed that the library has a median sort of project size of about $10,000, but also I know the mean project size, the average project size is about $100,000. So there's there's projects of all shapes and sizes in the tool, and I can't promise you that every single student project that someone might come up with would fit perfectly into GRITS, but there are a lot of abilities to sort of identify a project within the 120 different project types and subtypes. There's a lot of different resources, so hopefully if it was related to some type of resource, the project could be tracked in GRITS, regardless of the capital source, whether it be a student green fee or any other number of sources of capital. There's a lot of flexibility in that. But yeah, that's it. We designed it to try to meet the needs of most projects, regardless of the details.
Cool. And here's a question which I think might be for Mark first, and then actually I wonder if Mike could also comment on your experience. So the question is, do you have any best practice observations about whether the primary management of GRITS works best located in facilities versus sustainability offices, or perhaps somewhere else on campus?
It's a really good question. I'll be interested to hear what Mike thinks. But I mean, from what we know is there's a lot of energy managers that obviously are using GRITS. There's also a whole lot of sustainability coordinators, sustainability directors, and other people within a sustainability office environment that are using GRITS as well. And then there's lots of other facilities managers, project managers, other people in the facilities team that maybe aren't a dedicated energy manager who also use the tool. I would say less frequently, but also use quite a bit people on the finance side of functionality in a CFO's office or in a budgeting or finance department also can be frequently GRITS users. And then sometimes students, student workers within a sustainability office or a facilities office, students sometimes are users of it. But in terms of where primary responsibility sort of resides for the use of GRITS, I mean, more often than not, it's either a sustainability office or sustainability team responsibility, or it's within an energy / facilities department or a team. Those are usually the two most common. I couldn't say, I don't have any hard data for you in terms of where the majority is. I would say it's probably fairly evenly split, maybe leaning towards more on the facilities and energy manager side, but there's definitely a lot of schools where the sustainability team is the primary user. I don't know, Mike, what are your thoughts?
The latter description, where it's on the facility side, is where we have it set up, because we're the ones primarily that handle all the financial transactions related to our energy costs and utility bills. So, but that said, I'm kind of the gatekeeper, I guess, or administrator of it on our campus. But I've set up our sustainability office manager on the system, and as you noted, students as well, if they're looking at it, and it's been really helpful in that regard, because to answer the questions that come up about, well, what have you been doing and what have we saved and what's our track record? Because those conditions, in my own selfish interest, it's great to just point people like GRITS and say, well, you have a login. go check it, and you can see where we're at. And so I try to encourage people to look at it. I've also given links to our facilities director and associate vice president in finance, just so they can see as well where their investments are going. But for us, it's primarily on the energy side, but I encourage as many people to get aboard the system and look at it as well.
Great. Yeah, it seems like it can be a great tool for communicating across different departments as well. So we have another question. I think this is probably from Mark. Are the energy savings that are calculated in GRITS, are they based on estimates or are they based on historic utility bills?
The answer is both, and it really depends on the institution and on the project. You have the ability to use GRITS to sort of fully project out and forecast out savings, sort of projected, not realized or actual savings throughout the entire life of a project, looking at 5, 10, 15 years or more, right? So GRITS has that forecasting sort of projection capability, and then it obviously has the ability to record actual utility savings that have been achieved by a project through sub-metering systems that you may have in place that allow you to get access to that type of data. You know, there's a good mix of both types of projects projected well out into the future, with also projects that have sort of hard past data entered. And then there's another group of projects where there may not be sub-metering in place, and so there's estimated or engineering data being used for a project. And so when you're looking at in the library, there's a whole measurement and verification methodology section in the library. So if you have access to the full GRITS Unlimited version, you can click into the projects of other schools and see not just the overall data, but you can see what their actual measurement verification methodology is, and whether they're using sub-meters or whether they're using estimated engineering data, etc. So definitely there's visibility and transparency there. So when you're looking at other people's projects, at least in the full version of GRITS, you can see that. And then of course you can know the name of the person. So you could, if you're looking at a project at McAllister, well, you now know it's Mike, but maybe you didn't know it was Mike before today. You would know, you could call or email Mike and say, hey, you know, I'm another GRITS user. Tell me about this project happening in the chapel. You know, what's the, you know, who'd you use your contractor? You know, did you hit any pitfalls? You know, what would you recommend I do? You know, I'm thinking of doing something similar. What would you recommend I look out for or think about as I plan my project? Right, that's sort of the idea behind GRITS. Is there's lots of great information sharing that happens at different conferences and on other webinars and other ways, but oftentimes there's not the ability to go into this level of detail, and so you don't really know what other people are doing really in the weeds and the details. And so GRITS is a way to sort of help you zero in on that when you need it, but not overwhelm you, you know, the rest of the time. So you can go in and tap that library to sort of, you know exactly who's doing what, so you can learn from others and not have to reinvent the wheel.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point, actually, that this allows for, you know, energy managers or facilities folks to connect with others that are doing similar projects and really learn from each other. That's a really great feature. So there's another comment here for institution that says they have, let's see, over 135 facilities and over 700 separate utility accounts, and they're looking for an easier way to track as opposed to just typing in information, and they're wanting to upload spreadsheets. I know, Mark, you mentioned that I think it is possible for campuses to upload information into GRITS. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, definitely. So a few different things. So you can obviously enter projects one at a time and update them one at a time. We also have a bulk upload option. So if you have a lot of data in spreadsheets, you have 50 projects, 150 projects, heck, 500 projects, you can take that data, fit it to the spreadsheet template, and upload it to us, and we'll get it into the tool for you, so you don't have to be entering projects one at a time. If you have some data in, for example, Portfolio Manager from Energy Star, right, which is a pretty popular tool, freely available from the EPA that a lot of universities and other institutions use, we do have a link with Portfolio Manager. So on the back end, you can save your Portfolio Manager credentials into GRITS and pull data from Portfolio Manager into GRITS to help you get started using GRITS. That's another thing, although I think that's only for the GRITS sort of unlimited upgrade option. We also do have the ability, if there's a system that you have in place that you really have a lot of data in, we do have the ability to also build custom sort of APIs to pull data in from other platforms. There is a little bit of a cost with that, but that is another possibility if you want to be pulling lots of data in automatically from a different platform. GRITS can do that, and we have done that with Portfolio Manager in the past, for example. So yeah, lots of different possibilities. But I mean, just to give you a sense, you know, a large university in Michigan, who will remain nameless, you know, currently uses GRITS and uses it almost daily, if not daily, and they've got over 500 projects in the tool alone. and they've got multiple team members using it, and they're very active. And so, GRITS definitely, it works very well for smaller community colleges and liberal arts colleges, but it's also for medium and larger state schools and really large research institutions, both public and private. So, it does have the ability to sort of work at different scales and help meet the needs of institutions at different scales.
Great. Let's see. So here's that. It looks like you can track the carbon emissions savings for each project, right? And then also
Exactly.
financial savings. It seems that this could be useful for campuses that are pricing carbon. Do you know if any schools with internal carbon prices are using GRITS to calculate the cost and savings of projects with carbon prices included?
Good question. We should talk with Swarth more about that. They have just recently set up a green revolving fund. They also have a carbon charge that they implemented maybe a couple of years ago now. I actually don't know if they're directly utilizing that in that way, but it's a great idea, and it's something that schools could do and hopefully will do. But I don't have too many specific examples. Obviously, it's a fairly small group of schools that already have a carbon charge or a carbon tax, but hopefully that number will grow quite a bit. And I think GRITS could be helpful in fact, in allowing you to factor that in and help do financial calculations, including that, that extra piece to it.
Yeah, I would definitely be interested in hearing as well if there are any campuses that are using that with carbon prices.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm happy to look into it, and if you can share offline maybe who asked that question, I'd be glad to try and follow up with that person.
So I know we've mentioned that all signatory campuses have access to the basic level of GRITS, and it sounds like the first kind of chunk of what you walk through in terms of the project tab and entering their projects and looking at some aspects or a portion of the library is included. Could you just clarify what the basic level includes, and then you could also mention what the next level would include and kind of how much, I guess, what are the
Yeah, I'll give a range. Yeah, sure. So just to sort of go back to well, actually, I'll just share sort of verbally. We don't need to look at it screen-wise. So basically, all the main sections, right? Your own dashboard section, your own project section, your project detail section with all the different calculations and the ability to attach, documents to the project, be able to look at all the analysis, to be able to, have that public shareable link. All that kind of stuff is included in the free version that's available to all Second Nature signatories. And you can just go on the Second Nature website, and there's, and I think hopefully maybe after the webinar we can send it out to people as well, a link to just sign up. We can give you free access in your own login, and you can just jump in and start using it whenever you want. And there's no limit on the time period that it's available for you to use as long as you're a signatory. So that's sort of what's included with the free version. And then if you upgrade, a last thing that's included with the free version is the initial access to the library, right? So looking at the main library page of other institutions' projects, you can search and sort and filter and see sort of subsets of projects and what their performance is and what their savings being generated are. But then when you want to click in and look at all the details, that's not included. That's where sort of the line is drawn. The other section that's not included is the reports feature with the charts and graphs. That's also part of the sort of upgraded option. So with the free version, you get one user, although you're welcome to share that login with multiple people at the school, and up to 5 projects at a time. So you can enter more than 5 projects. You just need to delete one of the 5 projects. You only can save 5 projects in there. And then when you upgrade, you get an unlimited number of users, an unlimited number of projects, full access to the reports feature and the library and some other things. And the cost of that does vary based on the size of the institution's operating budget, overall operating budget. But just as a rough range, normally it's sort of in the $200 to $400 a month range, but with the 25% off discount for Second Nature signatories, that brings it down to the $150 to $300 a month range, just to give a sense of what you're looking at cost-wise, which, for web platforms, oftentimes web platforms can cost tens of thousands of dollars or more. So, and we build in technical support and training and all of that, so we try and make it really easy. There's, no other costs associated with using it. So yeah, that's sort of what's involved.
Great, thank you. Okay, so let's see. I think we're almost at the end of the hour. I think we might have time for one more question. I'm wondering, maybe Mark, you can start with this briefly, and then I'm curious, Mike, if you have any input as well. How can GRITS help with climate action planning?
Good question. So it can help in a number of ways, right? Obviously, when you're looking at climate action planning, you've got a carbon reduction goal, neutrality is sort of the long-term goal, and probably some interim targets with certain percent emissions reductions by certain dates. In order to get there, you can obviously buy some renewable energy credits, but you're really going to probably want to be focusing on doing a lot of projects, both in terms of efficiency and conservation, but also in terms of renewables. And big picture, you can come up with some ideas. Oh, we want to save 20%, reduce 20% of our emissions through efficiency projects. We want to reduce 10% of our emissions through renewables on site, and you can sort of carve it up big picture. But then when you get down to the details, well, which projects are going to actually generate those savings, and what is that going to look like, and how much capital are you going to need to do that, and what kind of return on investment can you get for that capital? All those kind of calculations you need to sort of. So often I'll talk to schools and they'll say, oh yeah, we've got a 2030 neutrality goal, or we've got a 2040 neutrality goal, and I say, oh, that's great. And they say, oh, we're working on planning all these different pieces. And I say, okay, and you've got a bunch of projects. I go, yeah, we've got a bunch of projects lined up. And it's like, well, okay, well, how are you going to pay for that? Oh, we haven't figured that out yet. And GRITS can really help sort of cut through that and make it easier to, show the business case and help line up the funding both internally and if needed externally to sort of execute those projects and sort of prove out the effectiveness and impact of those projects, both in terms of their carbon benefits, but also their financial savings. So I don't know, Mike, if you have other thoughts.
It's exactly where we are right now. We actually have an aggressive date. It's 2025, and we're not anywhere near ready to. We're not ready for it. It's basically where we're at. So we're having those conversations right now. So I will probably contact you offline just to get your perspective on that, because GRITS will be helpful for that. Again, I approach this from the energy side, and the projects we've done have been helpful into reducing if we have to buy if we have to buy credits, the amount that we have to buy. So to that extent, if at a minimum, it would help us help quantify what we might be looking at if we continue on our expected course, or if we accelerate the projects that we're doing, and can estimate what we'd be looking at in terms of credit purchases if we go that route. So yeah, it's helpful that way, very much so. But yeah, we're in the middle of that discussion right now.
Great. All right. Well, it's 3 o'clock. I just want to wrap this up with big thank you to Mark and to Mike for joining this webinar and talking about your experiences, and for all the great information about GRITS. Thanks to folks who joined. We recorded the webinar, and we'll be posting the recording online in the next couple weeks, so look out for that. And if you have any additional questions that you didn't get a chance to ask, or something comes up later, definitely don't hesitate to reach out to Second Nature or SEI, and we're excited about this new partnership, and I encourage schools to take advantage of it. So thanks, everyone.
Great. Thank you all. Thank you, Second Nature. Thank you, Ruby. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you.